Could the fish on your plate be an impostor? Be careful. If you're fooled, you could be in for some serious intestinal distress. There's a saying, if the price is too good to be true, it probably is. And when it comes to ordering fish, paying heed to these words of wisdom might just save you and your stomach from a substandard meal.
A little bit of crab, huh? Ever try it? Pretty good.
The truth is that quality fish isn't cheap, and while your local restaurant might get discounts for buying in bulk, it still needs to fork out a certain amount of cash to purchase high-grade seafood. As such, it's normal that fish is usually on the pricier end of the spectrum when it comes to restaurant menus. If a restaurant is selling its fish dishes at surprisingly low prices, it may be substituting quality fish for cheaper alternatives. A startling 1/3 of fish purchased in the US is mislabeled. Elizabeth Weiss writes in USA Today, a fillet of rare red snapper could really be cheap tilapia. A pricey wild-caught salmon steak from Alaska could be farmed Atlantic salmon from Chile. While seafood specials may look great on paper, they are usually a way for restaurants to move their least popular and cheapest produce. Top Chef finalist Chef Sylvia Barban said the following about why you might want to think twice before ordering the seafood special. Specials are tricky in restaurants. It could be the most fresh and delicious special, but in some restaurants, specials are the way to clean up the fridge. She advises restaurant patrons to check whether the side dishes that come with the seafood special are repeated elsewhere on the menu. If they are, you are probably eating fridge leftovers. For many restaurants, seafood specials are an opportunity to get rid of older fish before it goes bad. According to the late Anthony Bourdain, you should be particularly suspicious of seafood specials on Mondays. That's because most restaurants stock up on their fresh ingredients on Thursdays before the weekend rush. Since fish normally stays fresh for 2 days per the USDA, it's easy to imagine why this advice makes a lot of sense. And while Bourdain clarified that his recommendation pertained to restaurants where the seafood isn't the, quote, main thrust, you can never be too careful. High-quality fish should be able to stand up to the taste test with minimal preparation. As such, when it comes to seafood and meat, a heavy hand with spices or a rich buttery sauce can be a huge red flag. Although it has been thought that spices were used to camouflage the taste of spoiled meat in the Middle Ages, the fact that spices were simply too expensive at the time shuts this theory down. Nevertheless, with today's cheap and abundant spices, there's nothing to stop modern-day restaurants from using them to conceal the flavor of substandard or old produce. But it's not just about the taste. Restaurants can also mask the smell of festering or low-quality fish by bathing them in milk. American Society of Nutrition explains that the fishy odor and flavor of aging seafood is caused by the buildup of trimethylamine. The concentration of this substance gradually increases after a fish has been caught and killed. The fishiness can be easily counteracted with the casein protein found in milk, which binds to trimethylamine. And while you may not be able to taste or smell inferior fish, the dining experience may leave you stuck to the toilet. Any seafood restaurant worth its salt provides information about the origin of its fish. If this isn't the case, it's definitely worth asking where the fish was sourced. At the moment, 50% of fish sold globally is farm-raised. While farm-raised fish are cheaper than their wild-caught counterparts, they are usually fed inferior feed and can be loaded with antibiotics. They are also more likely to carry trace pollutants associated with inferior water conditions. As a rule of thumb, avoid catfish since it's often farm-raised in Vietnam, which has different regulatory requirements than the US. One of the issues is that the import isn't usually catfish but swyfish instead. This fish is referred to as catfish in Vietnam, and it typically costs $3 a pound, which is then labeled by restaurants as more expensive offerings such as American catfish or even grouper. Organizations like the Marine Conservation Society are good sources to educate yourself on the best types of fish to be eating. If you want a certain type of fish at a specific time and you want it cheaply, you may be setting yourself up for disappointment. For example, if wild salmon is in season from May to September, restaurants that serve the dish in January should immediately raise a red flag. Not only are they selling frozen fish, but it's also unlikely that they care about what they are putting on your plate. And since they are showing little care when it comes to devising their menu, they may also not be very picky when it comes to the quality of their catch. It's also not advisable to eat wild freshwater fish in summer. This is because as the temperature increases, both ponds and lakes can dry out. In turn, the shrinking body of water can result in an increase in pollutants that the fish will inevitably digest. The water also tends to be more stagnant during the summer season, prompting algae growth and deterioration in water quality. This, in turn, can make fish more vulnerable to parasites and disease. Don't be fooled. Chilean sea bass is not what it seems to be. In fact, it's really a kind of fish known as the Patagonian toothfish. While that might not sound the most appetizing, Patagonian toothfish was once a marvel of the seafood industry. According to The Atlantic, it started hitting seafood markets fairly recently thanks to the advent of modern fishing technology. It was cheap, pretty good tasting, and so it became a smashing success in short order.
Alejandro's prepared a delightful menu for us. Chilean sea bass, I believe.
But so-called Chilean sea bass was cleverly marketed and soon moved from being an affordable fish to sitting at the top of pricey restaurant menus. Unfortunately, the Patagonian toothfish soon suffered from overfishing. This particular variety was so affected by the fishing industry that it became a red-listed fish, meaning it is extremely threatened to the point of extinction. They say that the eyes are the window to the soul.
Look into my eyes. Your eyelids are getting heavy.
But they are also the key to knowing whether a fish is fresh or foul. Fish eyes are where you can start when you want to determine whether or not a cut is fresh. Almost all fish have relatively clear eyes that should bulge a little. There are very few fish that will not have these kinds of eyes, though walleye is one of the rare exceptions. While cloudy eyes may be a pretty obvious sign of a less than fresh fish, buyers need to take special consideration when gazing into the eyes of the catch of the day. Many things can cause cloudy eyes in fish, all of which are concerning. Cloudy eyes can indicate poor water quality or a poor diet, as well as injury, infection, or disease. However you slice it, the price may be lower for that cloudy-eyed discount fish, but you're probably better off looking for its clear-eyed betters. Fish can be downright beautiful, thanks in no small part to their iridescent scales. But there's more than just looks when it comes to considering scales. One study on fish freshness, published in the Malaysian Journal of Computing, notes that the color of fish scales is one of the most important indicators of freshness. At its best, fish scales should be bright and shiny. Even once a fish has been descaled, such as in a restaurant, the fish's flesh should not only be shiny, but firm to the touch. The skin should even be relatively elastic, meaning that it will spring back after you press it. As the book and study notes, dull scales and skin can be markers of advanced age and ill health. Dull or even white scales can indicate that the fish is dying, but whiteness can be caused by other concerning external factors like poor water quality or low oxygen levels. Either way, dull scales and skin are absolute no-goes when it comes to buying and eating fish. It's a tad ironic that a fishy smell is a bad sign when it comes to fish, isn't it? Yet, the ideal fish smell should be mild and never, ever carry a whiff of ammonia. Fresh fish should hardly smell at all. Sushi restaurants, which naturally specialize in uncooked fish, should likewise have a neutral fragrance. The smell of a sushi restaurant is highly indicative of the quality of its food and the cleanliness of the restaurant. There should be no sharp smell, although notes of watermelon and cucumber are a good sign. Sushi is usually served cooled to help prevent the spread of disease. However, one should be wary of clever tricks employed by less than honest restaurants to help mask the smell of aging fish. One such trick is cooling fish before serving. If you're worried, you can always wait a few minutes to let the roll reach room temperature before administering the sniff test. If there's an intense or sharp smell, consider sending the dish back and finding a new sushi spot. Broadly speaking, raw fish will have a milder smell than cooked fish, with an odor that progressively intensifies as the fish ages. On the other hand, we should note that fish smells can vary between different kinds of animals. Anchovies in particular have a rather distinct smell.
A smelly smell that smells smelly. Anchovies.
A good rule of thumb to follow when buying fish is that it should smell like its point of origin. Saltwater fish, for example, should still smell distinctly of the ocean when they're fresh out of the water. They're also noticeably smellier as they age, with the chemical trimethylamine or TMA acting as the main culprit. Saltwater fish have an especially high concentration of TMA to help counteract the saltiness of the ocean, but it can start to produce an unpleasant odor relatively quickly. So, do make sure that the saltwater catches are especially fresh. Freshwater fish can also smell slightly salty. However, because they have lower levels of TMA, freshwater fish have a slightly longer shelf life, at least in terms of odor. However, some report that freshwater fish that feed on algae, like catfish, can have an off-putting muddy smell. As long as the fish is freshly caught, it should have a light scent that gives a slight indication of where it's come from. Did you know that there's no such thing as white tuna? That's right, white tuna is a big fat lie. Popular at Japanese restaurants, so-called white tuna is often seen by patrons as a slightly cheaper option to otoro or fatty tuna and chutoro or mid-fatty tuna. So what exactly are you getting when you order white tuna? Chef Yoshihiko Kosaka of New York City's restaurant Kosaka said the following of the best possible outcome of ordering white tuna. People hope it is albacore, but when you see something that says white tuna and not albacore, it is not albacore. White tunas are usually oilfish, butterfish, or escolar. Many restaurants serve other fish under the misleading label of white tuna to save costs. Unfortunately, when it comes to the consumer, this practice can have rather undesirable consequences. This is because when you order white tuna, you are often served escolar, a fish known to cause gastrointestinal problems due to its high oil content. Catherine Hill from The Kitchen had less than flattering things to say about the uncomfortable consequences of consuming escolar. To be frankly and bluntly specific, and I'm sorry for this, consumption of escolar causes explosive, oily, orange diarrhea.
It's coming out of me like lava!
It's little wonder that escolar has been banned in Japan and Italy, and that it must come with a warning label in Canada, Sweden, and Denmark.